Hello guys and welcome back to Dark Horse FM, and in today's video we're going to be looking at training schedules in Football Manager 2022, and I'm going to share with you the training schedules that I have used since this game was released, the schedules I've actually used to get good results in the game, player wise and team wise. I'm going to also show you how to create a preset training schedule for your team, a personalized training schedule for your team. Now, there are over 100 ways in which you can go about training, but one of the best methods I tend to use with training is to leave it to my assistant manager. He obviously cannot do worse than I do when going about training, but so far so good. If you're interested in having a more hands-on approach towards training and looking to build a particular style of play for your players or get your players used to a particular thing, or if there's something you've noticed in your team that you want to sort out in the tactics or in your player attributes or in your player behavior, you can actually do that with training. So I'm going to show you a hands-on approach on how to create a personalized training schedule for your team. Like I said, there are many ways you can go about training, but this is the training tab. You can find the training tab obviously in the left hand panel here. This is the training tab, and then in order for you to create schedules for your team, currently I'm in the individual tab on that training, where you can go to the schedules tab and then you can see that obviously it's blank because no schedule has been selected. So you can go to choose any of the preset training styles. There are so many training styles with regards to the style of play you want to choose from, but today we're not going to go into these training styles in detail. We're looking at how to create training schedules for our own team in the first place. So you can create a brand new schedule. You're going to give you a blank canvas to work with, and this is what you can actually use to create your training schedules. It's all blank, so you can start to fill in most of these things. This is the way you can go about setting up your training for the week. As you can see, it's a weekly column, and by default, let's say a Saturday or Sunday might be the time you're going to have a match day, so you can throw in match preparation here. If it's a Saturday game, you can pull this to have your match on Saturday, and then the rest you can actually play with that and then input any of the training routines or training regimes that you have for the week. So we're going to go into, I'm going to share with you the schedules that I've been using in FM22, and then I'm also going to share with you the training schedules that I created last night. It was kind of like a Picasso moment for me, so I felt like drafting out something, and then I went on to create training schedules for myself and for my team that I'm currently using. That's Real Madrid right now. So I went on, and it kind of helped out. It kind of helped us get some wins as well. But I'm going to show you what I've been using before I went on my Picasso moment to create those random, bizarre training regimes. So the two schedules I normally use in FM 2022 are RDF's training schedules and BTN training schedules. RDF is one of the best tactic creators in Football Manager this year, and probably last year. So I've been following RDF for a very long time now. If you're watching this video, you probably have an idea who RDF is. And BTN also created Football Manager 2022 and 2020. Indeed, his schedule I'm using is actually 2021 training schedule, but it works for FM22 as well. BTN is an acronym for Bust the Net. I've also been following him, one of my favorite Football Manager YouTubers, for example. So looking at, if you go to import your schedule, you can see this is the ones that I created last night. They're quite bizarre really, but I'm going to show it to you, at least a few of them, how they work. But looking at RDS training schedules, he had only 4 training schedules that I actually used throughout the season. That's the one for one game schedule. This is how it's set up, just transition and match preparation. That's one thing I actually like about RDF and BTN's training schedule. There are many ways you can actually set up your training, but what stands out for me in their training schedule is that there's match preparation. I realize in FM22, match preparation is so important as it helps your team gain match familiarity and tactical familiarity with themselves, and it also improves team's cohesion. So this is RDF's one match schedule. We can use the same route to try and import a second schedule, which is the RDF 2-match schedule. Looking at just how it's set up, so this is how its 1 match is, and this is the 2-match schedule. So you can see that it's split in between, and then there's a match midweek. He also has an international break schedule to try and get your players all equipped for when they're supposed to be resting, I guess. International break, when there are more players going on international duties, you actually have a clear schedule for that to actually get your players, let me say, they're not bored during the international break, they're actually doing something. Sometimes for me, international break, I tend to schedule friendlies, but you can also have a full week of training as well. There's no harm in that. Looking at BTN's this is his schedule, FM 2021 schedules. It actually works in FM 2022 as well. Odd, but that's true. Looking at the complete training session, this is what BTN actually has. He even created a training schedule for lower league teams. So in case you're using a lower league side and you notice that there's not always training every single day, it's like Sunday league football, there's also a training schedule for that. And then he has a youth setup as well. This training actually helps you improve your youth. I also create something for the goalkeeper, but that's another training routine. I told you it was bizarre. Looking at the balance, this is early season, something that can work for your team in during preseason actually works out. So all these setups are something you can actually use in your game to actually get better results from your players and also get better tactical familiarity for your players in the game. And this is the training schedules that I've been using in FM22 alongside the default ones. As much as the presets are quite good, I noticed that having match preparation in between having match preparation regimes in your schedule week actually helps you get better results and increases tactical familiarity a lot faster. So I'm going to attach the link to RDS training schedules and BTN's training schedules as well. I don't know where I might find them because I kind of found them from Discord and SI community. You can actually go to the SI community, our Football Manager community, or any Football Manager community, FM Scout as well, FM Base. You can check for these schedules, but if it's impossible, you can also scroll to the descriptions as well. I'm going to find a way at some point. Just as recording this video, I do not yet have those links, but by the time this video is done, I probably would have had the link to those. So check the link in the description. You'll find the way to download these schedules and also the DHFM, that's the Dark Horse FM schedules, my bizarre schedules. You're also going to get that in the description as well. So I told you guys at the beginning of the video that we're going to try to create a brand new schedule, a blank schedule for your team, a preset. What's the word? I'm looking for the right English, please. We're going to try to create a training regime, a training week from scratch, just to show you how I actually go about doing this and how it's possible to actually go about creating your own training schedules. So the first thing I normally do is try to envisage when the match day is expected to be. If it's a Saturday game, obviously just throw in the match day on Saturday, and if it's a 2-game week and then you have a game on Saturday, it probably means that your first game is going to be on Tuesday as well, because to allow that 2 or 3 day breaks instead. But it's possible to have a game on Wednesday and have your other game on Saturday as well, but that's rare. So looking at Tuesday being the other game, this is just how you start to set up. The first thing I normally do is to set up the match, look for where the match is scheduled to hold, and then include that. If it's a Sunday game, leave it on Sunday, and then if it's a Saturday game, leave it on Saturday. Same thing for Tuesday and Wednesday. The next thing I go for is to look for the focus of training. What's the essence of this training week? Is it a game that we're playing against a team that is a much lower side, a team that is expected to defend in numbers? That's how I kind of look at my training schedules. Or am I coming up against a team that is much better than us, a team that is actually first in the league, that have better players than we do? If that's the way this training is going to go, you're going to have a different kind of setup for the week, especially. And also, if the focus is on increasing your players' tactical familiarity, or increasing their set piece abilities, or increasing their possession of the ball, how they can retain possession of the ball, all that comes into mind. That's the focus of the training regime. So in this particular training session I want to create, we're coming up against a team that is defensive but very counter-attacking. So the team is set up to counter-attack. So it means that once they get the ball, they're going to try to hit you on the break. So we're going to try to defend against that, or train our players to try and prepare for those kind of games. As we have the match day set up, but I'm also assuming at this point of the season, when this training schedule is created, that my players have some tactical familiarity. Let's say at least medium, or my players are not they're not in the dark with how our tactic is supposed to be set up, so they have a little bit of tactical familiarity. So the next thing we're going to do is to try and include the match match tactics. As you'd see me hover my mouse over match practice, I realize that match practice is actually for a game week where you're not expecting to have any match at all. So it's like a whole complete 11 versus 11 match practice. So it's like a whole 11-a-side game. So I tend to avoid this in most of my training schedules, and opt for the match tactics, where it just focuses on try to prepare our players mentally for the next game that we're expecting to have. The next thing I do is to include our defensive and attacking match practice. This is actually quite good for this particular save, expecting that our team is coming up against a team that can go on the counter attack. Attacking movement and defensive shape are 2 training schedules that I'm going to want to look into, and then the last one is going to be our teamwork. With all this setup, match preparation is set up for the final 2 games, or the final 2 days before match day. Now that we have our match preparation all set up, the next thing that we're going to look at is to try and combat the team's counter-attacking play. Looking at the way our team attacks, we're going to come to that in a minute. Looking at our defensive shape, we're going to look at how our team, or assess our team from our own point of view, and then look at the way the opposition is going to try and press. So if the team is actually a good wing play type of side, opting for a defensive wide and aerial defense combination in defense is going to help us try and stop the crosses. And indeed, if they do cross the ball, it tries to get our players in the good positions to try and head the ball away from the opposition and try and stop them from hitting us from wide areas. So that's the wide area covered then. And the next thing I'm going to look at is to look at the team's technical ability to press the opposition. That's going to be in transition. We're going to look to stop the opposition in transition phase. That's when the ball has been lost. We try to win the ball back early from them and stop them from having that counter attack. That option in itself, it's a preference. And if you look at the team's transition press instruction, it's specific work on transition the team from the defense to attacking to try and win the ball from the opponent phase and transition it from splitting it from defense to attack, so win the ball back from the opposition and look to hit them on the break. That's where the transition press works, and it helps to try and stop counter attacks as well once your team has actually lost possession. But an alternative to this when you're dealing with the counter attacking side could also be that you use the transition restrict. Specific work on transitioning to defense after losing possession by restricting the space which your position has to play, splitting into defense positional units. So this looks like from what I've just read, it looks like it works very well to stop counter attacks. So I'm going to include this instead, transition restricts. Now that we have our defensive all sorted out, the next thing I'm going to do is going to be quite scary. I'm going to move this into this side, move the aerial defense into a different day, that's on Tuesday, then include an attacking. I'm going to leave this space for an attacking training regime. So we're going to continue. Going into attack, now remember we said we're going to come up against a team that is very good defensively, that are solid defensively and are good at breaking on the counter attack. So in order to break teams down that are solid defensively, what I opt for is a patient approach towards attack. So what I'm going to include on a Tuesday is going to be the attacking patient. It means it works on a session dedicated to a patient attacking approach, speaking to positional unit. This way you can actually work to probe the opposition and walk the ball into the box quite carefully to try and break them down as well as they are in their solid shape as well. And another bizarre thing that I'm going to do is try to look for a more a set piece routine, for example, because I know when playing against teams that are defending quite deep, looking for set pieces or taking advantage of set pieces is going to be a very, very good advantage for us. So I'm going to include the set piece delivery option in this particular set to try and get our players to practice set pieces before match day. Now I did avoid general training from Tuesdays and Wednesdays as well as Thursday. I reserved Thursday and Friday for match preparation, but going into Monday, that's where we're going to include our general training. Looking at general training, I know it's not going to be much of a tactical setup. I'm not going to look to go into our tactics per se, because I'm looking to try and play the game for a specific style of play or a specific match scenario, for example. So it's tactical is a general training regime that you'd use earlier in the season, or when your team is not actually used to the tactic yet, or you do not have a good tactical familiarity, or you're changing your system and then you want to get your players used to the new tactical system you're bringing in. That's when you can now use your tactical setup. But when you're playing against a team when you're using a preset training regime for a particular match, and you're playing against a team that's coming up deep defensively, using an attacking preset is actually quite good. You're looking at your team's attack, and also look to prepare a general training for their team's general outfield kind of play, between outfield or overall. Try and get that in there to try and get your team to look at their holistic approach on the game as well, to look at their tactic as a whole. Then the third one I'm going to look at is also general training. Since we're playing against a team that is good defensively and are good at trying to hit you on the counter attack, having a possession general training on the last extra session helps us just retain possession a lot more and try and control the game in those areas. So that's basically a full match preparation week for a particular game against a side that are expected to be on the counter attack or expected to be defensive but can hit you on the counter attack. So that's how I set it up. There are many ways you can set up your training routine, guys, and let me know if you've actually tried something and actually tried creating schedules on your own, if you actually were able to get it to work, and what training sessions it is that you are using in your game. And also the last thing before I forget, this is probably the most important part of any training routine for me, is to include the match review. This part for me is a game changer in Football Manager 2022. It goes a long way in helping your team understand their tactical familiarity. You can see that tactical familiarity and team cohesion are increased. The players tend to understand more their mentality. Now with match review, it doesn't matter if you win, it doesn't matter if you draw, it doesn't matter if you lost the game. just include match preparation in all your training schedules after every single game. It allows your players understand the tactic more, see their errors, and tend to work to do better in those areas where they actually failed before. So if you have players that used to normally give away the ball in the defense and then allow the opposition to score from somewhere close to the box by playing out from the back stupidly, those errors will somehow be reduced the more you include match review into your tactical setup. It helps a lot to try and get your players to understand the tactic, and it increases your match familiarity a whole lot. So guys, that's basically how I go about setting my training. Now it could be very random. This is just one example of it. There's so, like I mentioned already, there's so many ways you could go about doing this. But if you're like me and you don't spend that too much time creating schedules like this, you can just download them. Like I mentioned, I'm going to include them in the description for you. You can always go and import your training schedules. There are 3 that I'm going to include in the description down below, so you can download them and then include them in your save. And I think we still have time to look at DHFM's training schedules, right? Now for the last part of this video, I'm going to share with you the training schedules I created last night. It was kind of like I mentioned, a Picasso moment for me. So I was just going through randomly. It started with something for extra time, really. So this is where a schedule where you're expected to go the length, you're expected to go the distance in particular game and play extra time and have, in case, penalties. So in those kind of games where you're expected to go into penalties, having endurance training and team bonding as well are going to be quite important. You can see match preparation and not much of general training per se, just tactical reminders, and then teams defensive shadow play and attacking shadow play, because for lengthy hours of the game you're expected to do one thing over and over again. So this is how I created this schedule, and so it's scheduled for extra time scenarios. Another schedule I looked at is a passive attack kind of schedule, which is similar to something that we just created, by where you're expected to play against a team that are somewhat sitting deep and trying to stay in a solid shape and stop you from scoring. By the way, if you're downloading these DHFM schedules, you might want to include match preparation at the end, match review, sorry. On the last day, I don't know, I think I forgot to do that, but yeah, I might have to do it before I wrap it up and set it to you. But if don't do that, remember to include match review like I mentioned. So for this setup, you can see that there's team tactical creation, chance creation, and chance conversion. As if your team is struggling to break teams down, or you're expected to play against a team that is going to be very defensive, having chance conversion and chance creation, as well as teamwork and attacking patient. You see it again, attacking patient, remember. So those are the schedules. I can't really go through all of them. There are a lot. I was actually having a moment last night, so it's a lot of schedules I actually created. Looking at goalkeeper and set pieces. Wow, this one is loaded. You can see that on this particular schedule, this is going to be an international window schedule, or a game week where you're not expected to have that many games. Then you tend to use this kind of schedule, and you can see I included tactical trainings, that defensive shadow play and attacking shadow play, to try and get the team ready for, or try and not allow the team forget their tactical setup, I guess. But then there's set pieces. There's a lot of set pieces in this particular training regime. Tactics is still a focus, and then also you can see match practice at the end. So you're not expected to have a game week on this particular day. That's why it's match preparation and match practice at the end. So you can use this schedule for your international break. I called it the GK set piece week. Now you can talk about training at length. It's probably one of the fun parts of Football Manager as well, trying to design your team in your identity somewhere. It's kind of fun, really, I have to admit. So there's a lot of training schedules here that I actually created. I created one for Saturday and Sunday in case your game was on Saturday and Sunday. So I'm going to pack this all up for you, and you can find it in the link down in the description down below and download it for yourself. Also, thanks guys for sticking out for the length of this video. I can't remember how long it is yet until I pack the video up. And thanks for sticking out for this video. If you need much help going through training, or indeed any other Football Manager ideologies or Football Manager tactics that you're currently working on, remember to leave it down in the comments below. Let me know what kind of training schedules are you normally using, or in what way you normally set up your training that is interesting and tends to give you good results. Thanks for sticking out for the length of this video, guys, and I'll catch you much later in the next video, if I can actually have time to create one. There isn't much time to play Football Manager these days, but it's the little period I have, I'm kind of enjoying it, really. So thanks for sticking out with this video, guys. I'll catch you guys in the next video.